Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first day of open discussions for PTG. So today we have a couple of items in our agenda, and yeah, the agenda is a bit light for today. So we intend to discuss the future of shard transfer, as well as some SRBAC changes that we are that we intend to have during Bobcat. And also, right after these discussions, we are going to have a cross-project discussion with the Nova team. And that's cross-project discussion is supposed to be about the work we are doing together to get support for VirtualOFS. So yes, and for today's first topic, we have the shard transfer future development, which is something that we have started in the last cycle, and a couple of things are already available. So we wanted to discuss a couple of things that we left open and that we think that could be good enhancements for this feature. So yeah, Gautam, would you like me to get started, or would you like to get started?
Uh,
Yeah.
I uh, um I speak up about this at begin, and uh, could you please help me to speak about this later? Uh, because my English speak is not good. uh, 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 in uh, in the uh, in the last version, we developed the function about share transfer between projects. Now, the current we support the transfer share between projects, but the share has some limit, such as we cannot transfer share with network, or the share is in share graph, or has replicated. Uh, this is limited. And later, we plan to develop transfer share with network. That means now we transfer share. In the future, we can transfer share network. If we transfer share network, all shares in that network will all be transferred. Um, we there is some question about the feature in later. Can we allow transferring with snapshots? I see the code today. I found now we now allow transferring share with snapshot, because the snapshot is bound to a share, not bound to project. So if the share has been transferred, then the snapshot belong to the share also has been transferred. What we need to do is to check the snapshot quote when accept the share when accept share with snapshot. So now we have done about this. Transferring share within graphs. I think transfer share between graphs is just like transfer share with network. That's because the share is uh, belong to a group. We cannot only transfer one share in that group. If we want, we may transfer the old group. About share with replicates, I'm not sure how to do about this.
Yeah, this one was the tricky one at the last one when you attempted the first round of this. Replicas are what we had to remove at the last minute. Partially because of the way the replication workflows actually work, and with share transfers, we were sending requests only to one host. That is the host of the active replica. But with replication, you can have multiple active replicas, or you can have multiple replicas where there are access rules applied. So we would have to make requests to multiple hosts, and partially the reason is that you may want to clear these access rules, and there might be something that backends need to do to do the transfers themselves. So that's at least two different actions that will need to happen on each backend that hosts one of these replicas. So that's the bottom line. But I mean, it was for the sake of the quotas and the other parts of the API, that it looked a whole lot simpler to have replication come in the initial patch. But this was the challenge, that since we were only making one RPC call, RPC call, we were not targeting all of the backends. So I guess I mean, we could do one of two approaches, like we discussed on the code reviews. And I mean, that would be about, so we realize at the API layer that the share is replicated. It has multiple replicas. And if it is a, either a readable style replication where there are in-sync copies that each have their own access rules, or it is this mythical writable replication that there is no backend that supports it right now. But whatever be the case, like, we have to target any readable or writable copy of the replica of the replication relationships. So we can do that with a fan out from the API layer and wait before accepting the transfer of the share, before completing the transfer of the share. Or we can initiate RPCs from the share manager itself, like we are currently doing. So we would have the RPC go out to the share host that has the active instance, or at least the representative instance for the share. And we can send out the RPC requests from there to the other share managers that manage the other replicas, and wait for those actions to be completed by the other replicas. And that should dovetail in the same kind of mechanism that we currently have. My only concern is, I mean, again, this is a RPC call and not a cast, and we're doing like a synchronous update from the during the transfer accept phase. The idea is that you whatever is happening at the back end is not significant, does not take a lot of time. But then again, yeah, we could time out on such a call if we spend too much time doing something.
Yeah.
So I guess
Sorry, go ahead.
no, yeah. So I guess there are downsides to either approach, and we'll have to work around that. Like for example, the first one, if we did say we could fan out at the API layer, we would have to have a rollback mechanism in case there is something that goes wrong with one of the replicas and stuff. And the latter, I mean, we would build that with the rollback in the share manager itself, but presumably the rollback is a little easier originating in the share manager.
Yes. For the choice two, like there are places that we do this, but it's for the places that we do this, it's not something that we do like for a couple of times, for example. So in this case that we have singled out, which is the case for that we do in the share server migration complete, where we send an RPC API to the share server. We are currently sending a single request because, I mean, at the end of the migration, a single share server needs to be dropped if we reached certain conditions. And like this other case, for every single instance we have, we would need to do these RPC calls. But yes, as we are doing like choice two already in some places, I think this would possibly be something consistent with things we have been doing, even though I think in an like API perspective, it is also like good to be able to send and go ahead and try to anticipate failures or anything when you are in the API layer, so you can fail earlier. But yeah, that's something that's the Carson way in.
I mean, we do have the option of making this asynchronous. I mean, so transfer accept right now is a synchronous call. You send the API request, and the API request goes to the backend, and we wait for the backend to respond, and then we do the quota adjustments in the API layer, and we return with a 200 if everything went fine and the share is transferred. All the database changes are all committed and it's done. But I mean, it is also a weird one in that, right? Like not a lot of synchronous calls ever go out and reach out into the backend like that. The only other example that I can think of is fetching capabilities from a backend where we do a RPC call. So it is possible to break that and make it a asynchronous mechanism, where we can take the time to do this. Like we could fan out from the API layer and make RPC casts instead of calls, and just return saying 202. I am waiting to accept the transfer, and at a later time the transfer would just be accepted, and we can go ahead and set the status and stuff. The only I think one downside will be the transfer record will still be left behind, and we won't clean it up automatically. But I think there is already a method for deleting expired transfers.
Yes.
So something like that can be done even for successful transfers. And my fear is that like we might have to do this even with share groups and share networks, right? Because any place where you're talking about more than one backend, that's what you'll have the same issue. Like how do you communicate to all of the backends that are there? If you have a share group, the share group can span. I think share groups would just stick to a single backend, but a share network possibly can span multiple backends.
Yeah.
Hmm. Hmm.
Might I ask a stupid question, maybe? I haven't been following this share transfer, but why are we talking to the backends at all? So are there backends that know about the ownership?
Yeah, there are. So in the CFFS driver, at least, there is a concept of the project ID and namespacing extended from OpenStack into Ceph, and you can create like users and actually allow access to those users, and those users are the same as your Keystone users, or could be at least.
Okay, yeah. Because for the NetApp driver, this problem is not there.
Yeah, exactly. So if presumably, I mean, such a call to a backend like NetApp where there is, it's just a no op, is going to be really quick, and it'll just return with nothing, and we'll just be, the current mechanism would just work. But the concern is, I mean, there are backends like CFFS that have some knowledge of the projects, and so what do you do with those kinds?
Yeah, I see. Yeah.
So I mean, this is quite different things that we need to fix with this. I guess one of the questions we need to ask is what is what is an achievable next step in this? The next good thing to do with this API, and what can we target for the Bobcat cycle? And we can follow that up, with future cycles, because looks like, I mean, there are multiple different problems, right?
Hmm. I think next cycle we can try to transfer share with network.
Yeah, that might be a good this thing. We might actually be able to identify what we can do with replicas as well in the process. So the good thing, I think, is that when Hexene wrote this initial design, the database, the API, both were written in a way to accept anything can be transferred, not just shares, except the first iteration of it was just for shares. But I mean, if you were trying to transfer shares that are exported over networks, all the DHS is true shares. It would actually not make sense for you to transfer just one share at a time. I mean, presumably because the accepting project, the transferred destination, will not have access to the share network. And so I guess we were thinking at the time that instead of transferring shares individually, we would do it via transferring a share network. And that would mean you're transferring all of the associated resources, shares, share groups, share servers, anything in the process.
will trigger a transfer of LC to the network.
Yeah, okay. Transferring JSS through shares, it seems like a challenge too, but I think it is achievable. Yes, and I agree that it does not make sense to transfer only a single share, because I mean, it's kind of the idea of multi-tenancy, right? So we would have share servers belonging to a tenant that like, related to that share network. And I mean, if you just move one share, and if it's still tied to the same share server, it wouldn't make sense, like in thinking of a design point of view, maybe. So yeah, I agree with that. Like the idea of moving everything might be better than like trying to possibly move things separately. Okay. So yes, sounds good, and it's good that I see JSS True transfers as being like a good next milestone. Yeah, okay. So I think Hexene is planning to work on this for the next cycle, as you mentioned.
Okay. I will try to write a spec about transfer share network when I'm free. I'm busy those days in my company.
Yeah, that makes
Oh,
sense.
sure.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for spending time on this, despite your changed responsibilities.
Yes, thank you very much, Hexene. It is great to have your efforts on this. Amazing, yeah. Okay, is there something else you would like to bring up for this topic? Okay, I can take silence as nothing else you would like to bring up. Yeah, Hexene, thank you for joining us. Thank you for like the brainstorming on this topic, Gotham. I will take some more notes, and I will have the summary in place for this after the PTG, so I can share in the mailing list. So yeah, thank you very much. I think, yeah, the next topic then it's secure RBAC changes in Bobcat. We are 10 minutes ahead, so that will, I think we can continue, and we could, yeah, that will grant us a couple of minutes possibly of break after this discussion. So yeah, Gautam, Vida, Liron, would you like to start?
Hey, yes, thanks, Carlos. And I can share an Etherpad, and when taking some notes, we can check with Vida and Liron as well. Just a second. Awesome, thank you. I did want that Taiga link. Okay, cool. So let's do a rundown of what's going on with Secure RBAC. This you might recognize this format from the last few times that we've been looking at this stuff. So there is a community-wide goal. You might already be aware of it, that we have to provide a better default RBAC than we currently do. And the default RBAC work started in about the Wallaby cycle, and we were thinking about the default roles that Keystone had introduced at that time, as well as the support for scopes, and Keystone's support for scopes were beyond like what Manila could support at that point of time, but it was still evolving when we began implementing it in the Wallaby cycle. And so we went through, we added deprecations to every single API policy that was to try and support scopes. That was the idea. And I mean, you can see the wall of text that's over there, but the concept over there was that there were there was going to be two scopes of operation that Manila could support. One would be the project and the other the system. And the idea was that you would have project members or any users that were constrained to working within a single project, or would have permissions to do certain things that and then there were system scoped actors, such as users, administrators, or even readers that would be able to do things that were across projects. But then that kind of I mean, that was at least the initial goal, and we were kind of trying to test this by, creating a behavior that was opt-in. So we changed all of these RBAC rules, and then we created these Oslo policy config options. So unless you enabled those config options, you wouldn't be able to see this new behavior. And we would always maintain backwards compatibility. That was the work that we had done in the Wallaby cycle. And we took some time after the Wallaby cycle to try and get the pulse of how this is working with operators and existing deployments. And we realized that there were many things that were backwards incompatible with the approach of switching to the system scope. And it would actually upset a lot of established workflows like automation and other things in data centers. So we kind of had to pare back from there. So we took the approach to drop system scope as a thing across all of the OpenStack projects. And this was as at least a requirement. So technically, if you are using a system scope token, things would not work even if you did switch on these Oslo policy config options. But it was done under the presumption that uh, operators were not taking to the system scope the way it was designed, at least. And so we needed another approach besides using system scope itself. So right now, from the Z cycle, all of the Manila RBAC API, RBAC policies in support scope, but it's not really, I mean, they don't support anything besides project scope. So if you have an administrator token, and the administrator token is considered as being a God mode actor, pretty much like the legacy administrator that was there for for these services prior to these releases, and prior to you switching any Oslo config, Oslo policy configs as well. And so besides the administrator, you would have default roles for a project member and a project reader. And so the reader, as you can imagine, is a read-only role, so it would only have access to get and get APIs mostly. And the project member, on the other hand, would have access to everything that was usually there with any project user that can read and write resources. And there was no concept of a project admin. If you have an admin in the in your cloud, and you should, that admin would be a overarching administrator user that has access to all projects and stuff. So we're still not filling in the gap that operators really wanted, which is that there were some things that they would want to delegate to project scoped administrators of sorts. And right now, by default RBAC, at least, it's not yet there. But default RBAC is adjusted to remove the need for system scope. Default RBAC is adjusted to remove the need to create a custom RBAC just to enable reader context, because there's that part is covered as part of the default. That's the idea. So that happened in the Z cycle, and most of Antelope, we spent the time to do testing. That was the theme of the release. It was add as many secure RBAC functional tests as possible. And so all of these functional tests are in the Tempest plugin, and they cover the default RBAC as it should be when you switch on those Oslo policy config options. So there are two options you would set on Manila, which would be Oslo policy enforce scope and enforce new defaults. And if you set them to true, then we would stop using the deprecated rules, and we would require the use of projects scope tokens. And so there is a Tempest job, and there are several Tempest tests that actually test the behavior of the API by setting those options in the gate job. And there's also corresponding Tempest configuration and so on. And yes, I think part of the thing that I did want to highlight at for the Antelope cycle was the tremendous work that was done on the testing. So kudos to Vida and Liron that spearheaded that effort, and also to everybody else that participated in the hackathon that we had midway the release. And thanks for the link there. I think there was another link to the Taiga board that was tracking this. Just copy that from. And yep, so that's the Taiga board. And as you can see, a lot moved in progress and done and ready for review. So we still have a lot to review and wrap up. And as we keep making more API changes, introducing new policies, I mean, those probably are not showing up as cards yet on this Taiga board, but they will. And so we're at a much better place than at the beginning of the Antelope cycle in terms of the tests. And the tests have surfaced quite a few bugs as such, and one of them is actually a long known issue, which is that if you were using a UUID and performing something on a resource that didn't belong to your project, let's say get a share that didn't belong to your project, you would see a 404. But if you did the same thing with a share replica that didn't belong to your project, you would see a 403 instead of a 404. And that's actually I mean, in some circles, it's considered a security violation where it is you are able to you're able to determine that that resource exists because you're seeing a different error response from the server than you would if you didn't have access to that resource at all. Or so if you saw a 404, you don't know whether it really exists or it doesn't. And so that gives you a better security than if you see a 403, then you know there's probably a good probability that that resource exists because you have access to that API and you're able to do that with other resources. So suddenly a 403 would mean that that particular resource exists, but you're not able to do anything with that resource or that particular action with that resource. So we've been discovering bugs like that. We don't have fixes all the way yet. There is just, I think, 1 or 2 fixes that's currently in Gerrit, but more should follow in the in this release. And we would like to backport the those fixes to the older releases as well when we finish landing them. And yeah, this is where I think I should pause and let Vida and Liron um, fill in if I missed anything.
To be honest with you, you covered everything, so I don't really have something to add. Yeah, but yes, we need to get to push the automation review. We have about 8 pages that are waiting for review, so we need to But currently we have a job that runs about 215 tests, so it's great. We have in good status. But yeah, there are some more updates that they need to review and also to add some other support for other features.
Agreed. Awesome. So if you have any patch out there and you're listening, that is that's got some review comments that has probably gone into merge conflict, etc. But you were writing these RBAC tests. Please take a look and refresh those patches. And I know Liron and Vida are paying attention to that, and feel free to add the rest of us as well. We can help review it and get it to closure. And the hope is that we'll be able to run these tests and discover any more hidden issues like the ones that we've been hitting. So far, it's been good. The issues that we've discovered, we've either fixed the major ones or at least triaged, and we're adding the fixes soon. So that I think will be the main focus.
Thanks. Just wanted to add that we were talking about, trying to help with the reviews, some new strategies. So if anybody needs help reviewing any of these patches that are ready for review in the Tiger board, let us know. Get back with us. We have some new strategies to use. Also, I added the link to the bugs that we opened in case anybody wants to refer to them.
Nice.
Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Vida. All right. So I think reviews we can definitely follow up. I guess Carlos, one of the things we can do is add this to our review attention stuff, and probably I don't know if we want to have review jams like we were discussing from the retrospective, but this might be a good candidate because these are easy wins. They're much smaller patches.
Yes. No, that sounds great. I think they are very good candidates for us to get and use them as like guinea pigs, and then we can just try to review this while you are on a call. Yeah, thank you, Vida, Liran, for all of the great work on this, and Gautam for pursuing the changes for RBAC so far. Yeah, I see.
Yeah, there's more. Let me. Yeah, so that was all the work that was done so far. What needs to happen is a little bit more besides the bug fixes. So one of them is, I mean, the top thing on the agenda for this cycle for us is going to be switching the defaults. And as you know, we are in a Slurp release format, which means that we are going to support users that go from Antelope directly to the C release without having to deploy Bobcat release. And so whatever changes we make is subject to that sort of a upgrade support cycle, right? Technically, we are not planning to make major changes in the Bobcat cycle because I mean, if we were trying to make deprecations removals in the Bobcat cycle, that would be bad for people that are leaping from Antelope directly to C, the C release. And so we'd like to limit the scope of the changes that we'd make. And so one of the changes that we can achieve, though, is switching these defaults to true. So right now they default to false. So you are seeing the same legacy behavior unless you opt in. And so now that we have seen some degree of maturity in this, and so we would like to switch the defaults to true in the Bobcat cycle, and we would follow that up with an upgrade note that going into C, we would need the scope tokens to interact with Manila APIs. Keystone has a way to work around this, so we shouldn't see any impact for the most part in deployments or in automation scripts and so on. And so nothing should break. It should just allow you to create new users and assign them maybe a new role, the default reader role if you want. And besides that, we would start adapting Tempest, and the Manila Tempest plugin is written in a release agnostic way for the most part. Like it is meant to be used against multiple releases of the of Manila itself, and we try to maintain that backwards compatibility. And so we would have to make changes to the default Tempest tests that we have in a meaningful manner and incrementally. It's going to be a slow process, this one, partially because we don't want to break any existing older branch testing. And the idea here is that if we are trying to test a list API or a get API, we would only use the reader rule. A reader role user to do that. Right now we don't. We just use a regular member or an admin, and so if we were to start testing the least privileged user that is allowed to perform that action, we do it in a small and slow and phased manner. So I'm hoping we'll make at least some of these Tempest changes. We kind of have a look at what those changes will be, 3-4 cycles down the lane when everything in Tempest is going to perform exactly like this. And I guess we're going to see some framework from the Tempest folks as well for this. They already did. They already do have support for something that we are currently working around in our Tempest tests, where we would like to have multiple users from the same project, and that wasn't something that was available by default, but apparently it is now, and so we can start using it if we'd like. So those sort of minor changes are targeted at the Bobcat cycle, and we'd also start implementing phase 2. But phase 2 is something which phase 2 of the goal is something that is a little less impactful on Manila APIs. So not a lot of the Manila APIs actually use are meant for services alone. Actually, there's probably no Manila API that is meant just for services. It's either meant for users or administrators. And when I say services, I mean other OpenStack services. But if you look at it that way, I mean, in Nova there are some APIs that are exposed that are meant for Cinder to be using, and nobody else, not even an administrator. Similarly, I heard that in Neutron there is going to be there are some APIs that only Nova can call, and no other human or automation in that process. And so they're planning to scope those APIs to a different role called service. And they're also at the same time across OpenStack trying to create the concept of a service role that is actually doesn't require the admin permissions. So if you have the Manila user, and the Manila user is the user that you're configuring to interact with Keystone, to interact with Nova, to Cinder, to Glance, and with Neutron in your deployment. And the reason you would do that is because maybe you were using the generic driver, or you're using any DHSS true driver that needs to interact with will make Manila interact with Neutron, right? And so in these situations, if we were to use specific APIs, we have two ways of doing those. One is we would just use the user's token to go ahead and make that API call to that respective service. Like, for example, if we were to create a service instance, we can choose to use the user's token to create the service instance. So the share server is in the user's namespace. Or we could use the service user to create the service instance such that the service instance is in the service namespace. That's Manila's own namespace, and so on. So there are some things that we do as the service, and some things that we relay the user's token to do. So I think we have to audit those calls to these different OpenStack services and find out what calls are always happening using the service user and the service namespace. So that is mainly to help these other teams, these other project teams, make progress on their API, policies that need to also allow service users to interact with certain APIs that we are ending up using. And phase 3, I mean, this again is, I think, a little bit of a wait and watch approach. Because the manager role, it is something we can introduce today, but Keystone itself does not support bootstrapping it, and there's not it's not too easy for you to get it from the get-go from Keystone. So this manager role will substitute the project administrator that we had in the Wallaby cycle. That we were trying to do in the Wallaby cycle. So a manager would be able to do certain actions by default, and those are the actions. And we'd just extend those actions to also occur with this manager role. No promises that this will happen in the Bobcat cycle, though, because I mean, we may not have the time or the resources to go to write this, but it is certainly something that all projects are planning to do within the C cycle, within the cycle that comes after Bobcat. And some more RBAC tests, like we discussed, and also we have not a lot of unit tests with secure RBAC. There's a bunch of tests that have not merged yet, so we probably could use some focus time on that. And I did, when I was thinking about this yesterday, thinking about the show and tell that we were planning in the retrospective. I think now is a good time that we can do one focused on policy enforcement, and how you can write policies for your APIs and stuff, and how do you toggle them, how do you test with different things and stuff. So we can have like a show and tell. pretty much on this. So I guess I'll leave that up to you, Carlos, in case you were, if we want to decide on a schedule and stuff. And in that, I'd like to talk about how, what the RBAC enforcement philosophy has been, that we have been loosely enforcing through code reviews mostly. And if we can maybe get a doc out of that, it might be a good thing for the future. And one last thing at the end of this Etherpad that we had was, what's the fate of this thing? We are planning to drop all of the deprecations in the D cycle. And so technically, even if you are going to deploy Antelope and then upgrade to C, you do have one more opportunity to switch back to the old default RBAC. This is being done in an abundance of caution, and I say that because existing deployments should not see any impact besides the addition of a new reader role by default. Besides that, there's not much that's going to change. But even then, I think we are just being in line with all of the projects to kind of remove these deprecations only in the D cycle. And until then, we're going to take the pain to have the kind of testing and the the granular changes that we make to these policies. That's it.
Yeah, thank you. Great. This is a very detailed, it's a great update. So yes, I'm glad to see all of these changes coming together, and like all of the work you have been doing. So this is really great. And Olin, for having the session you suggested, like a show and tell over the cycle. I think we can have a couple of dates possibly already like defined in the beginning of the cycle, and then we can already like have it scheduled, and we will know that this is coming. There are a couple of other things that we'll do as well. So maybe we can try to set like those things regularly, or try to think of a strategy so that like every 3 weeks we would have one of these events. So one of them, like they could be related to the code reviews, they could be related to this new suggestion or other things. So yes, I'm all in for this. Thanks for the suggestion. Let's make this happen during the cycle. Yep. Is there something else you would like to add to this discussion, and any question to ask Gautam for this?
I just wanted to clarify here. So let's say, some deployment, they do a slurp from A to C, and they still can revert back to old policies, existing RBAC. And so once they actually deploy D, at that point, they won't be able to revert back, correct? So is this a per deployment based, or is it across all that release? I'm not clear how that will work.
Yeah, so that's a great question, Vida, in terms of like how we have to even communicate it in the release notes and stuff. So going from A to C, the change that you're going to see is that these new defaults are enforced by default, and so you can switch back and make it work like the way it was if there is any issue in the deployment. So we have that flexibility to go set those to false again, and so those options will stick around in the C cycle. And in the D cycle, since we will remove all of those defaults, we'll also be removing the support for those options. And so when you go from C to E, I mean, you cannot turn them off any longer. Those even if you do try to set those config options, it will be ignored by the service. So it's the same kind of one cycle deprecation, but this has actually been multi-cycle deprecation in a sense.
Oh, got it. Thanks, Gautam.
Yeah. So yeah, it'll be interesting crafting that upgrade note, but I think that should clarify it a little bit more, and we'll probably write a doc to go along with that.
Yeah, if we need to. Right.
Great. Yep. Thank you very much. Just a time check. We have the session with Nova on VirtualFS starting now. So we will be switching to the Nova room, and we will continue the discussion there. But for like the Manila Open Talks topics today, this was the last topic we had, and we'll meet tomorrow in the same room for the regular Manila topics again. Tomorrow at the same time we met today, so 14 UTC. So thank you for joining for the discussions. Thank you for preparing this, Gautam, and for the very detailed update, Gautam, Vida, and Liron. We'll see you in the Nova room.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. See you.